Well, we're going to, Mark and I are going to divide this up into approximately 3 parts when we get to the actual program itself. But let me start with saying a great thank you to Rachel, Taylor, Joe, Clarion, for continuing this visionary activity. You know, when you travel the world and you talk about PPPs, you realize, you don't realize perhaps around the room how unique this type of gathering is at the level of credibility, the seniority, and at a global level. And it's great that the work is continuing. Thank you very much for everything you do every day, first of all. Second of all, a programming note, the individual that's responsible for universal health care coverage in Indonesia was supposed to be on our panel with us. So we're supposed to have a seat in the middle. But the persuasive president by the name of Jokowi asked him to do something else and to be elsewhere. And so that tells you, I mean, it's bad for us, but it's really great for Indonesia, and it's frankly great for universal health care. And it tells you at the level of some governments how important it is. We understand it's, you know, we were just in Kenya as Medtronic. It's one of the 4 top pillars of Kenyatta's overall presidency. It's really inspiring to see these examples, but there are logistics details. And so you get to hear from Mark and me on this. And I'm going to first kind of frame out the discussion to begin with, if you don't mind, for a few moments. Arguments you probably usually don't hear. So if they're meant to be provocative, they're meant to be thought-provoking, and disagreements are absolutely 100% welcome. Okay. Then I'm going to turn to kind of a Davos style. I don't know if you guys can see us, but we're going to try to do Davos style without the tilt, without the, if you can see us. I'm sure the camera can, that's good. So I've got a lot of questions of Mark, but then we immediately want to turn it over to you all. So that's the program here on this particular panel. So thank you very much for starting the morning with us, and wonderful remarks by Peter. We're all thinking about rollback and change of big money in the world, particularly government money, and we all understand that people may be thinking of other things, and we truly understand that. But at the meantime, I think all of us recognize that non-communicable disease is potentially on the rise. Certainly, undiscovered NCDs that people didn't even know existed are now being discovered. You've got universal health care coverage, just like we were mentioning about, and with increased aspirations from populations, you've got multiple millions of people literally going into the middle class that have very much higher, elevated expectations of their governments to deliver on things that are very, very important. And as everybody knows, this year is the NCD year, the high-level meeting. A couple of people that are in the room have been absolutely formative in that. I'm a proud disciple of Sir George Alin. Thank you very much, Sir George, for being here. But then you've got Johanna Ralston, who with the World Heart Federation did some incredibly formative work. She's working in other areas of NCDs, but staying true to the cause. The 27th of September is a very important date for us. Everybody understands, and Amanda Glassman, who's in the audience as well, understands that global health funding, so I'm calling everybody out this morning, you betcha, in a positive way. Global health funding for NCDs is still less than 1% of overall global health funding, ladies and gentlemen. Despite the economic cost, despite the burden of disease, despite all the great work that's been done, less than 1%. Rachel Nugent, our colleague, did a lot of that great work. And so that's what you have, right? And I think at the same time, countries are absolutely fed up. That's what they're telling us. Fed up with sending their doctors abroad, letting those doctors go abroad, their nurses, their practitioners. They're tired of having their human capacity to leave their countries. They're also fed up with having their patients leave their countries for anything beyond the common cold. Right? So it may be great for some countries, it's not so great for others. But that human capacity and that physical infrastructure, that investment capital that could actually be in place is not there. We all understand this. We also understand that in some countries, democracy is on the rise, particularly in Africa. Peaceful transitions to democracy, but not only. There are some places that are not going exactly that direction, but let's celebrate those that are. And that means that governments are going to need to be much more responsive, as we talked about. So we understand that there's a huge gap, and that's a visible gap, as opposed to the invisible gap, which was only visible to health practitioners. or to government ministers before. It's absolutely visible to the population. So it's creating very much a surge. Ministries of finance, primarily, almost ministries of health, secondarily, are obsessed with figuring out how to balance all those needs with the population, with their election prospects. At the same time, trying to figure out the fundamental question: is health a debit or a credit on their balance sheets? Footnote: I am a part of the commercial business. I'm not a part of the philanthropy. I love our philanthropy. They do incredible work. They are a 501c3. Medtronic is a money-making business. I'm being honestly, I listened to Deborah Birx's remarks yesterday. Sounds like she's welcome to talk to companies like us, and that's great. Okay? Debit or credit? That's what the finance minister is thinking, and I'm going to argue for the credit. I bet you so is Mark, but he may totally disagree with me. We'll see about that. That brings us to the issue of infrastructure. Around the world, you think about the connection between infrastructure and economic growth. Even Donald Trump would probably agree there's a connection between infrastructure and economic growth. Right? Bridges, traditional infrastructure, roads, bridges, these type of things. So it's incredible. Why in God's universe is not healthcare considered a part of infrastructure? Why is it excluded from multilateral development bank funding? Why is it often excluded from unilateral development assistance around the world? It's beyond me. So we've asked health ministers, finance ministers all around the world. Literally, when we go in and meet with a minister, we'll ask them the question: do you consider health as part of infrastructure? 100% of the time, not 99% of the time, 100% of the time, at the most senior levels of government, the answer, they look at like I just got off, I'm like a meteor from a foreign planet. Really, that's a discussion, they say? And that's most big emerging countries that we've spoken to, both in Africa and multiple. Why is it that is the case? It's beyond me. I can't figure out a reason why. There may be institutional, historical reasons, but this has got to change. This has got to change. That gap cannot be closed without considering healthcare as part of infrastructure. Immediately, and we gave a seminar this week at the World Bank, people think of healthcare infrastructure as these big tertiary healthcare hospitals. That is incorrect, incomplete. Healthcare infrastructure could be something as small as a cardiac cath lab, which is very, very small. It could be a tiny little clinician's practice. That is great. It's both physical infrastructure and human infrastructure, and that includes doctors, that includes nurses, and it includes all of the above. If you don't have all of that, your country is on the verge of or is bankrupt in terms of the ability to actually deliver proper healthcare systems. And that's what we're focused on. And as such, finance ministers, when they hear the arguments, much more cogently and much more in a business-like way, and that could be from government, doesn't have to be from business. They're very, very interested in hearing those arguments. So they definitely know, and they always react to the fact that in Nigeria, over $1 billion leaves Nigeria every single year. Finance minister knows that. I've talked to him. Knows that. Incredibly irritated, incredibly inquisitive as to how they can get a good solution to that problem. That's the case in most African countries that I've spoken to, and I've not been in all, but that's certainly the case. And it's also the case that people, I'm giving you a couple arguments here, people don't understand how the presence or the absence of healthcare infrastructure benefits or takes away from the overall foreign direct investment picture. Frankly, you're going to send, if you're sending senior executives to make major foreign direct investment decisions in most emerging countries, and the first question that they're asking, first two questions that they ask, is there a good hotel that I can stay at? And is there health care? Okay? That is not usually what's picked up in the normal reports. But if you talk to foreign direct investment agencies, you talk to foreign direct investment agents outside of healthcare, the BPs, the IBMs, Totals of the world, this is what you hear. You don't have healthcare infrastructure, your country will be poor. This is what finance ministers believe. This is what they need to hear. Those arguments are presently not being made. So that brings us to the issue of PPPs. PPPs are almost inextricably linked in people's minds to infrastructure, development of proper infrastructure. And they've been great in most other sectors of the economy, right? We've got roads in Chile, we've got roads in the UK, we've got some hospitals in the UK, which are perhaps the exception. But the issue is there are PPPs all around the world, well developed in other sectors, but the N here, when it comes to healthcare infrastructure, is actually very, very small compared to other sectors. And even in that small N, I mean, the reality is most of those healthcare, there's a sort of a negative reputation around PPPs, but that's what we're here to challenge. That's what we're here to work on. That's what we're here to advance the discussion around here with Mark. And there are probably multiple reasons for that, including the complexity. You know, again, I come back to some interesting statements of our president, not by way of endorsement, but just by way of statement. I think it's probably the only real moment of modesty that I've heard, which is that healthcare is more complicated than I thought. Wow, that's okay. That's great. That's probably a really good reason. I'm sure it's not that easy, but the reality is we want to do more healthcare. I mean, we want to bring up that end so we actually have sufficiency in terms of quantity, in terms of quality, that we can actually do a real diagnostic on why these things are working and not.